Folks, today I'm pulling back the curtain on a story that should have every Canadian and European wide awake. We're talking about Donald Trump, Vladimir Putin, and how the US is sleepwalking straight into international isolation. Here's what we are covering today. First, the background. Trump's track record of self-interest, fraud, bankruptcies, and why he only plays for Team Trump. Second, the war crime. The illegal war with Iran that Congress never authorized, and why Trump thinks he's above the law. Third, the puppet master. How Putin is pulling Trump's strings and why Russia is shearing every single move. And fourth, the fallout. Europe and Canada are done playing nice. And what happens when the US leaves NATO for good? Stick around, because this is the story of how the world's so-called leader is choosing to become the world's loneliest country. So, to get into the mood, just take a look at a few, indeed, telling clips from the NATO summit. Like this one. Donald Trump is pissed with NATO. Trump presents a very long list of grievances with the military alliance. He complains that NATO countries didn't help him in his war of choice with Iran, and he also still wants Greenland. And for good measures, he just insulted Spain on top of it. Take a listen.
And I'm not happy with NATO because of the fact that they didn't want to help us with the number one state sponsor of terror, that's Iran. They were unwilling to help us. Now, in all fairness, I didn't speak to Mark about it. I think if I did, it might have been different, but we didn't need help. But I was really testing. I wanted to see whether or not they'd be there. And the answer is they were. I spoke to Germany, I spoke to France, spoke to UK, spoke to Italy, I didn't speak to Spain. Spain is a wasted cause. We don't want to do any trade business with Spain anymore, by the way. I'd like you to cut it off. Spain is a terrible partner in NATO. They don't participate, they don't pay. I don't want anything to do with Spain. Cut off all trade with Spain, please.
Here is Mark Carney talking about the changing threats that we are facing. And he calls Russia out as a direct adversary. And just in the next sentence, he also said that Canada and Europe moving away from the US within NATO. Take a listen.
Where the threats that we face are changing rapidly, both in terms of the nature of warfare, hybrid warfare, hypersonic missiles, autonomous warfare, and also the direct threats that we face in terms of hybrid warfare. Russia is a direct adversary. Burdens are shifting. Burdens are shifting away from the United States towards Canada.
And here is the orange American conman reiterating again that he wants his greedy hands on Greenland. The funny part, though, is that this demented moron, no offense to any dementia patients, please, confuses Greenland with Denmark, and he's clearly said Greenland does not pay for Denmark. Take a listen.
Well, that's what hurt my relationship with NATO, because Greenland doesn't help Denmark. Denmark doesn't spend money to really help Greenland, but it's an important part for the United States. And it's surrounded by China ships and Russian ships. And that's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. It was Greenland that, and it continues to be, that should be controlled by the United States, not by Denmark. And when they wouldn't go along with it, and with all the money we spend to help them with Russia, and we don't have to spend any money, we could remove all of our soldiers out of Europe. Because as you probably noticed, Europe's a very different place than it was 20 years ago. A lot different, much different. It's a much different, and they better be careful with immigration.
And this is an important one, folks. Here is MS Now senior White House correspondent Von Hillard about the US under Trump's leadership moves towards isolation as leaders from ally countries like Canada, France and others, leaving the US behind. Take a listen.
Tracked so many of these visits. What are you anticipating today?
Hey, Alicia, look, we have talked for years now about the president's move toward isolation from U.S.'s longtime allies and NATO. But what is different about this annual summit is the fact that it's not just Donald Trump. He's not the only leader that is looking at an isolated America. It is the leaders of our longtime allies, from Mark Carney to Emmanuel Macron, who are actively been laying the foundation over the course of the last months for economic, political and military future in which the U.S. is not relied upon. And literally in his first public remarks this morning, the president was very open when asked about whether the U.S. would even withdraw soldiers out of Europe, for instance. And he said very explicitly, we don't have to spend any money on Ukrainian defenses. We could remove all of our soldiers out of Europe, essentially making it clear that his threats could very much turn into consequences in terms of his role, the United States' role overseas. And I think as part of this, if you go back to earlier this year, Alicia, it is not lost on anybody there at the NATO summit, the fact that when the president announced his board of peace, he turned to Middle East monarchies. He turned to authoritarian leaders. Out of the 31 other nations that are a part of NATO, just 4 actually joined him on stage for the signing there, really calling into question the president's, not just the president's future here with NATO, but more so the way in which NATO allies are posturing their own countries' political, military, and economic futures in a way that is more or less void of such reliance on the United States itself.
Yeah, that was interesting, eh? But now let's start with the elephant in the room. The orange American conman, running his biggest con ever. Donald Trump has been convicted of 34 felony counts of business fraud. He has bankrupted 6 of his companies and failed with so many others, hard to count. He stiffed contractors, ruined small businesses, and some of those people ended up taking their own lives because of it. And don't forget, Trump's presidency, this guy we're talking about, is deeply, deeply corrupt. His family pocketed billions by leveraging the Oval Office for personal gain. This is a man who only cares about one thing, himself. Not America, not the world, just Donald J. Trump. So when you see him cozying up to dictators, it's because he admires them. He wants what they have, their power and attention. And he takes it from whoever he can get. That's the guy Americans elected as their president, just so we don't forget. Now, here's where things turn current and ugly. Trump started a war with Iran, a war of choice, not necessity. And guess what? It is straight up illegal. Article 1 of the US Constitution says only Congress has the power to declare war. The War Power Resolution of 1973 says a president must get Congress on board within 60 days or pull the plug. But for the American fraudster, all that is just a suggestion. The House and Senate actually passes war power resolutions to rein him in. A bipartisan slap on the wrist that the White House simply ignored. 34 Senate Democrats joined to demand legal justification for the ongoing hostilities. Their message? The 60-day clock doesn't have a pause button. Trump called the lawmakers unpatriotic and basically told them to fuck off. And when he came and begged for help, they made it clear to him. NATO is a defense alliance. It's not Trump's personal attack dog doing his dirty jobs. They made it clear, we are not covering your mess. And the orange idiot? He got mad because he honestly believes NATO should be his own little army. He's too arrogant to accept that that's not how NATO works. Now, to the part that should terrify every freedom-loving person on the planet. The Russian dictator Putin wants the US out of NATO. Full stop. He's wanting it for decades because he thinks without American muscle, Europe becomes a buffet of vulnerable nations. And Trump, he's basically doing Putin's bidding. It's like a job interview for an oligarch position. Think about it. Trump constantly praises Putin as smart. He makes his own intel agencies look like complete idiots just to validate Russian talking points. He pressures Ukraine to freeze territorial gains, which is exactly what Putin wants. And the list goes on, much too long for this video. Numerous journalists have pointed out that Putin's foreign policy decisions have flipped the script on Putin. Suddenly Trump is the baddest guy in town. But make no mistake, Putin still uses flattery and ego stroking to manipulate the orange maniac. Like he dangles the prospect of peace deals in Ukraine. And Trump moves policies just to appease the master. And folks, no one can call it a conspiracy theory, because it all happens in plain sight. Russia's strategy has always been divide the West, weak NATO, and see what we can get out of it. And Trump is nothing but a failed business guy and con man. And most importantly, he is Putin's useful idiot, wearing a MAGA hat. But here's the thing. World leaders aren't stupid. They see exactly what's happening. Canada's Mark Carney has shown deep resentment over Trump's tariff attacks and sovereignty threats. Denmark's Mette Frederiksen flat out rejected Trump's demands to take over Greenland. And it was not a polite diplomatic rejection. No, that was in "are you out of your fucking mind" territory. That he can't have Greenland is just another reason why the orange idiot hates NATO so much. Francis Macron has famously icy relations with Trump, and Spain's Pedro Sanchez called Trump's style bullying. Even Trump's supposed allies distance themselves, because being associated with him is becoming politically poison. European public opinion is in free fall. In Denmark, trust in the US dropped from 20% positive to a staggering 84% negative. That's not a disagreement, that's a breakup. And now for the big question. What happens if Trump makes Putin's dream come true and takes the US out of NATO? The nuclear umbrella collapses. Europe loses America's strategic number shield, leaving only France and the UK's smaller national arsenal. That is not really a big problem, actually, because no one really wants to use them. It's just a deterrent. And Europe loses critical enablers. Satellite intelligence, early warning systems, strategic transports, all the stuff that makes modern warfare work will be drastically reduced. It'll cost a fortune. European nations would need to spend an extra 250 billion euros annually just to replace US capabilities. We're talking a decade or more of massive investment and building just to catch up. But here's the thing. Even if the orange idiot and his moronic followers laugh about it, Europe can and will compensate. They are already in the midst of building independent defense networks and regional deterrence. They are investing in European-made weapons instead of buying American crap. They are building a military future that doesn't depend on Washington. And who is left out? The United States. Isolated, irrelevant, shrinking. Watching from the sidelines while the rest of the truly free world moves on. And Putin takes the US to the cleaners. So, let's be clear about what's happening here. Trump, in his demented mind, is choosing isolation. And he's going to get it. He's picking Putin over partners. he's treating allies like enemies and enemies like friends. And the result? If the US will indeed leave NATO, and that is not a sure thing at all, my friends, the US will also leave the world stage for a long, long time to come. Europe and Canada, we will survive. We'll adapt. We'll build a future that doesn't rely on a president who is willing to lead not only his allies, but his own citizens into ruin for his own financial gain. Here's my question for you. Do you think the US will actually leave NATO? Or is this all just Trump's political drama from a con man who thinks it will benefit him? The world is watching, my friends. Stand with your allies, stand with democracy, stand with Canada. Elbows up, folks. And if you want more breakdowns, just like this one, clear, direct, no nonsense, then hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching. I'm Wilfried Lemkuler with Europe Curious, where we don't just repeat the daily headlines, but open the curtain so you can see for yourself what's really behind it. See you in the next one.